Hello everyone, my name is Daniel and I'm a programmer and an artist, and today I'd like to give you an overview of my Petrify asset library, which is a set of geometry node modifiers as well as shader nodes, materials, textures, and a bunch of other assets that are all designed to help you be able to make rocks easily in a procedural way so that it's easy to create variations once you've designed one. So I want to show you how all of that works. This video is just going to be an overview of sort of what's included in the library, how you install it and set it up, and then getting started making your first simple rock, so that to sort of give you a point to launch off from to experiment and combine the modifiers and other assets that come with the tool in different ways. And then I also am planning to make additional videos where I go more in depth on specific features like making custom materials or other things like that. If you are interested in seeing all of the details, check the description. There's links to my website where I have a page that describes all of the features that come in Petrify, all of the assets. You can see what they all do, as well as specific showcases such as the one that you see on screen here, that were made with the assistance of the Petrify Library, where you can click on those and go through step by step all of the modifiers that I added and sort of my thought process for why I was adding them and what I was trying to accomplish with the different modifiers at the different steps to achieve the end result. First thing I want to do is show how you can install the asset library if you've purchased and downloaded it. So once you've downloaded it somewhere on your computer, there are two files available for download. One is the Petrify Library, which is the main one that you want here. That one, you should open it up or right-click on it. Somehow you want to extract it somewhere on your computer and make a note of where that is so that you can add it as an asset library. The other zip file is an add-on for Blender. It's my DGH Utils add-on. It's optional, but it adds some functions, some operators that can be useful when you're working with the Petrify library and modifiers. It has some useful tools for modifiers in general. If you're interested in about that, you can read about all of the tools that it has also on my website. Once the Petrify library is extracted, you'll have this folder. Just make a note of where that is. So I will copy this path. And then back in Blender, open up your user preferences and go to the File Paths tab. Under Asset Libraries, you're going to want to create a new asset library. Go to that folder that we found, open up the Petrify library, and add it as an asset library. That's all you have to do. It's added. I like to remove the underscore library from the name of it, just because it's not really necessary. Obviously, I can't do that because I already have it in here. My copy that I work on, so I'll just get rid of that. If it installed properly, you should be able to go to your asset browser and select the Petrify library, select it in the categories, and see all of the assets. It should look like this. All right, once you have the library installed and you've maybe taken a look at some of these preset rocks, sort of seen how those are done, I would recommend just trying to make a basic little single rock. And we're going to go through that step by step now, and I'll show you how you can use the modifiers and mention a few different variations you could consider as well. So to start, let's just add a cube. The base mesh can be anything, but I recommend keeping it pretty simple. Something like a cube or a cylinder, keep it pretty low poly. That just tends to work better with the Boolean operations. If you get too much geometry, then the Boolean operations can start to create errors. Anyway, once you have a base mesh, we'll just start with a cube scaled up. You can go to the materials and pick one that you like and drop it on the cube just so that we have something other than a white cube to work on. And then once we've done that, we can start building our modifier stack. And so the way that we want to do that is first by shaping the rock. So we're going to add some modifiers that are going to cut away parts of the rock. So I generally, to start, like to add a cut faces modifier just to get rid of the perfectly flat edges of our cube and to make them look a little bit more natural. So if we want, we can turn up the cut depth to make it more random, so we get rid of more of the original faces, or we can also play with things like the angle to rotate, skew the rock a little bit. Then obviously if we change the seed here, we get a slightly different variation of that same operation. All right, So that's cut faces. I think I'll just show all of the different cut modifiers and sort of how they're different. So next, let's add a cut random modifier. And the way all of the other cut modifiers besides cut faces have two additional features. The main one is, or one of them is preview, where you can see the origin that it's cutting from and what direction and how deep. So if you increase the cut depth, you can see it cuts way more. And then the other one that really affects the the style or the shape, the result that you get from the cut, is these cutter counts. So these are different shapes that you can use to cut with. Face is just a flat knife that's going to cut a perfectly straight line through it. Wedge cuts in like a V shape. You can sort of see it here. It cuts like this. And then block cuts a rectangular shape out it, so you can't see it as well, but it cuts sort of like that. Sphere cuts with a sphere, so you'll get these sort of smooth curved cuts, concave like that. And then smooth also cuts with the sphere, but it's inverted, so a really big sphere makes much softer shapes. By changing the counts, so by setting it to let's do one sphere and one wedge, then half the time it's going to be using the sphere cutter, and the other half of the time it'll be using the wedge cutter. If we set it to 3 wedge and 1 sphere, then 3/4 of the time it's going to use randomly pick a wedge cutter to use on a point, and then 1/4 of the time it would pick the sphere. So by adjusting those values, you can sort of control the weights of how often it uses each different shape of cutter. And then we can tweak the depth again. We could turn the count up if we wanted. We could adjust the spin to change what direction the cuts went or make them more or less random. All sorts of controls that you can play with to get different sorts of effects. So let's turn this back down to like 12, and that's cut random. Let's turn preview off. Then the next kind of cutter is, let's do cut around axis. Cut around axis works, you can pick which axis you want it to cut around. So by default it's Z. So we're cutting in a circle around this axis like that. So you can see the actual circle drawn around the mesh. You can control how tall that is, like how randomly far up or down each point is moved with this band width. And then with band offset, you can change where that origin point for the cutter is. So we could slide it down to the bottom, say. Tilt sort of skews how the direction those cut a little bit. If we spin it, if we set spin to 1, we could turn them 90 degrees and then like cut horizontally across the rock instead of, if we had it set at 0, it cuts vertically. You can also have it either match the normal of, so if this point here hits this face, we could match the normal of that face for the direction we're cutting, or we could turn it off, in which case, you can see the effect most here on the corner. Here you can see this cutter is cutting straight into the side of the cube, whereas if we turn match normal to 0, then it cuts in from towards the center from a circle, essentially, instead of matching the normal of the face. So a bunch of different settings for controlling that. So maybe let's set this to block, and we'll cut, let's cut fairly deep. Let's slide our offset down to the bottom. Maybe increase the sharpness a little bit and give it a bit of a tilt. Make something sort of interesting. Maybe we'll do some wedges, some blocks. I don't know. So that gets us that result. Now, one of the things you see is kind of weird is this is a really sharp edge here. And oftentimes you want to get rid of those, which is what the cut along edges is great for. So cut along edges is another way of cutting. We can preview it as well. If we turn this one off. And there's two ways to select which edges you cut along. The one is the sharpness threshold. So if we turn this down to 0.4, we can see now we have some edges that are being cut. As you turn it up, only sharper edges will be selected. So as you turn it down, you'll select more and more edges to be included in the cutting. And then the length threshold, if you had like a really short, sharp edge, but it was shorter than the length threshold, it would be excluded. So that also controls the density. So if I turn this down, you see there's a lot more points to pick from. It's going to pick from these points randomly to make the number of cuts that you select. So keeping that higher is usually better, so that they're just the cuts are more likely to be spread out around the mesh instead of all clumped in one place. And then again, you have the selections for the type of cutter. Sphere I often find works really well for this, just to knock back some of the corners. We could turn the number of cuts up even, and then increase the cut depth. And the cut along edges works kind of like a bevel modifier. You can see it just knocks back those sharp corners. So with something like that, that's a perfectly fine result, I think, for our low poly rock. So now we've finished our shape. We're happy with that. The next thing we want to do is finalize it. So the first step in doing that is to remesh it. You can use the remesh modifier that comes with Blender, but there's two features that I've added to the remesh modifier that I made with geometry nodes. One is if I turn on wireframe here. One of those is if we turn this up, you will see that on these, let's turn wireframe off, you can see this banding artifact from the voxel remesh. I don't know if you get the same with some of the other modes of remeshing, but if you remesh voxels, you can get this banding artifact on slopes. So I added this randomized topology option that really helps to get rid of that. And the way it does that is just by making the topology random. So this is sort of makes quads if you have flat surfaces. Like if it was a cube, it would be mostly quads. But randomized topology is just able to break up all of those patterns, which looks a lot nicer for these natural sort of settings like a rock. Anyway, remesh is often the slowest modifier in the stack just because it creates a lot of points and does a lot of merging of vertices and stuff like that. So it is one of the reasons I added this bake operation to my utilities add-on, which is included as an optional download when you download the Petrify library. What it can do if you have it installed is you can select your remesh modifier and click bake, and then it's going to add a DJH bake modifier after that and disable everything above it in the stack. So you can see we go now from the cube directly to this result, and it's basically saved like a mesh with all of the modifiers calculated, which means we can skip over them for every future calculation. So now if we were to add a displace modifier, the displace modifier that comes with Petrify is just a standard displace modifier, except it has these texture sets preloaded into it. So we could say select a Voronoi pattern here, and then set the strength to 1 so we can see what we're doing. 0.5, and then we need to turn the mid-level down so that it makes less of an effect. So that looks pretty good there. And now let's turn our strength down to something, do like 0.33 for that instead of strength to, I don't know, 0.5. 0.4, something like that. So you can see I'm able to edit this displace and it updates really quickly. If I was to disable the bake and re-enable the whole stack and then try to edit this displace modifier, you can see how slow it updates. So being able to bake the stack halfway through can really help with when you're tweaking the settings on modifiers further down in the stack. And then once you're happy with that, whoa, where'd that come from? You can just move that bake modifier below it in the stack, select it, and click bake again. And now your displace modifier is included in the bake. And then whenever you're done with it, you can just delete it and turn all the modifiers back on. Or if you have it baked like this and you decide you want to change a setting like the resolution of your remesh, you can just select your bake modifier and bake it again. It's going to replace it with the new setting. And then we could say, well, I don't like that. Let's go back to 0.03, bake it again. Now it's going to be a slightly higher resolution. So that's how you use the bake operation. I'm using it all the time, not only with the Petrify nodes, but with any modifier stack that gets a little bit slow. It can really help just to be able to skip over earlier modifiers in the stack that you're not editing right now. All right, anyway, I think that's enough about the bake operation. The next thing we need to do to finish up this rock is to just add an attributes to it and a UV texture coordinate. So let's add a UV unwrap now, and we're going to unwrap based on edge angle. You might have to turn down the angle. If you click preview islands, it'll show you what it's grouping together as an island in the UV map. And changing this minimum face area can help, especially with smaller rocks, to turn that down to get a better split. Now we have texture coordinates. The final thing that we need is attributes. And the attributes save things for adding effects such as wear on the corners or shadows in the concave parts, or weathering effects, stuff like that. And then if you wanted to create variations of that, you can just make a copy of it. And we can get rid of the bake modifier, randomize the seeds, and then bake the whole thing. Or turn all the modifiers back on again. And you can see now we have two rocks made in using the same steps, which produces very similar results, but they're two slightly different rocks. We could also then, we could add like a cylinder. Oops. Something like this. And then we could copy the material and copy the modifiers and get rid of this bake it again, or turn them all back on. And you can see you can apply the same style also to different shapes, which will obviously produce a different result, but should also keep kind of the style of the rock that you designed. And then if you feel something like the corner's too strong, you could turn the corner wear down. In the shader, there's tons of options to configure. All 6 of the materials have lots of options. You can click through and change the colors to get different sorts of effects. You can change the variation to get more extreme contrasts and stuff in the colors. Corner wear, you can adjust the strength of that effect to whatever you want. The normals, how strong is the normal map. Randomize goes through the different texture set patterns and picks different variations, so it'll just change slightly how the material looks. And then you can change the scale of the textures, as well as how strong the dirt effect is on this one. So there's a lot of options, variation and control in the actual materials as well. And you can also control all of that from the material tab in the properties. So that is how I would go about making your very first basic rock using the Petrify library. In the future, I want to get into more in-depth things, specific uses for some of the modifiers that are kind of glossed over, like slice and fracture, or how you would make a larger rock formation. There's still some areas for improvement in that area, I think. How you would make custom materials, I want to get into that. How you could take one of these rocks results that we got and then sculpt on it to really push it to the next level. Because no matter how you go about making a procedural base, I feel like there's a limit to how far you can go with that, and at some point it really helps to take over and manually add those extra details if you need to take it that far, if you're going to be close to it with the camera or whatever. And like I said, I have showcases on my website that you can go through step by step to see how I made those images and the modifiers I used and what settings and everything like that. So I recommend checking out that for additional information. If you're interested in purchasing the Petrify library, there's links for that in the description as well. You can purchase it either on Blender Market, which is soon to be Superhive, or on Gumroad. And I also have a Discord server if you have any questions about the library before you purchase it, or questions about it after you purchased it. If you encounter any problems, anything like that, please let me know. I'd be happy to hear your thoughts. Other than that, that's all I've got for this one. Thanks for watching.